Luna Malcoria's hands did not tremble when she pushed the Lichen King's son from the obsidian tower. 3 years old, heir to the forbidden bloodline by ancient covenant and moon law, erased in a heartbeat, his fragile body spiraling through the blood-red dawn like a dove with severed wings. His scream devoured by the howling wind that tore through the jagged spires of the fortress of eternal fangs. But Vespera witnessed it all. The Omega had been gathering moon flowers in the shadow garden below, her pale hands stained with soil and nectar. Her existence as invisible as all Omegas were condemned to be in the court of Lichen King Alaric. Voiceless. Nameless. Nothing. And when the child fell, when little Lucian, the rightful heir, hurtled toward the blood-soaked stone courtyard, something ancestral and unholy ignited in her blood. She moved before thought could cage her. Her body exploded with impossible speed, a blur of silver and shadow, arms reaching desperate, catching the boy midair mere feet from the stones that would have shattered his skull. The collision slammed her to her knees, bones cracking against the courtyard floor, but she clutched him tight. His small heart hammering against her ribs, his eyes, those sacred amber eyes of the royal bloodline, shocked wide but alive, impossibly, devastatingly alive. Above, in the tower window carved from volcanic glass, Luna Malcoria's face appeared. Pale. Predatory. Searching the courtyard below for the broken corpse that should have painted the stones crimson. Vespera crushed herself and the child against the garden wall, concealed by shadow and angle, her breath frozen in her lungs. The boy's warm tears soaked through her worn cloak as his tiny fingers twisted in the fabric. "Mama tried to make me fly," he whispered against her shoulder, his voice small and shattered. Vespera's eyes burned as she pressed deeper into the darkness, feeling the weight of what she held. Not just a child. The last living thread of the first wolves. The future of a kingdom rotting from within. And she, an Omega, the lowest creature in the hierarchy of fangs and blood, had just become the only thing standing between hope and the grave. In that moment, hidden in shadows with a prince's heartbeat against hers, Vespera understood the truth that would hunt her forever. She had not saved a child. She had declared war on a queen. "Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because what comes next will shatter your heart before it remakes it." Vespera's lungs burned as she carried Lucian through the serpentine corridors of the fortress, her feet silent on stone that had drunk the blood of 1,000 traitors. Every shadow felt alive, every echo a potential executioner. The boy clung to her neck, his small body trembling violently, his breath coming in hiccuping gasps against her throat. She couldn't take him to the servant quarters. Too many eyes, too many whispers that would slither their way to Malcoria's ears before moonrise. She couldn't hide him in the stables or the wine cellar or any place the guards would search when the Luna discovered her son still breathed. The Wall of Whispers. The thought struck her like lightning. The ancient western wall, built centuries ago when the fortress was young and the first wolves still ruled with mercy instead of terror. Somewhere in that crumbling stone labyrinth was a cavity, a forgotten space she discovered years ago while scrubbing blood from the dungeon stones. A hollow barely wide enough for her body, concealed behind a loose panel of obsidian that had been painted over so many times the servants had forgotten it could move. She descended 3 flights of stairs, taking passages reserved for Omegas, routes designed to keep thy-rooted presence from offending noble noses. Her arms ached from Lucian's weight, but she didn't dare set him down. If anyone saw him, if anyone recognized those amber eyes. "Where are we going?" His voice cracked, small and lost. "Somewhere safe," she whispered, though the word felt like ash in her mouth. Nothing in this fortress was safe. Not anymore. The western wall loomed before her, its stones black with age and neglect. She pressed her body against the cold surface, fingers searching, finding the edge of the panel. It resisted, swollen with moisture and time, but she wrenched it sideways with strength born of desperation. The cavity yawned open, a wound in the fortress itself. She crawled inside, pulling Lucian with her. The space was barely larger than a coffin, smelling of mold and forgotten death. Rats had nested here once, she could see their skeletal remains scattered in the corners. She positioned herself between the boy and the bones, her back against the far wall, and pulled the panel closed. Darkness swallowed them whole. For a long moment, they sat in suffocating silence, their breathing synchronized, their hearts hammering a duet of terror. Then Lucian shifted, his small hand finding hers in the black. "Mama tried to make me fly," he whispered, and the words shattered something in Vespera's chest. She pulled him closer, feeling his tears hot against her collarbone. "I know, little prince. I know. Am I bad?" His voice broke on the question. "Did I make her angry?" Vespera's jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. She wanted to scream the truth, that his mother was a monster, that she'd tried to murder him to install her bastard on the throne, that this innocent child bore no blame for the poison that ran through royal veins. But he was 3 years old, and the truth would break him worse than the fall. "You are good," she said instead, each word deliberate, fierce. "You are the best thing in this cursed kingdom. And I will not let them hurt you again." Outside their tomb of stone, she heard footsteps. Heavy boots. Guards searching. Lucian's hand tightened in hers, his whole body going rigid with fear. Vespera pressed her lips to his hair and held him as the footsteps passed, as the darkness pressed in, as the wall of whispers kept its ancient secrets one more day. The great hall reeked of lies and roasted flesh. Vespera moved through the gathering like a ghost, her silver hair hidden beneath her servant's cowl, a tray of blood wine balanced on trembling hands. Every step felt like walking through her own execution, knowing that somewhere above, hidden in the suffocating darkness of the wall of whispers, Lucian waited for her return. If he made a sound. If someone heard him. If the cavity flooded with the storm rains that were already beginning to hammer against the fortress stones. She forced the thoughts down, deep into the pit of her stomach where terror lived. Luna Malcoria stood at the head of the obsidian table, draped in mourning black that made her skin appear corpse-pale in the torchlight. Her hands were folded demurely before her, her eyes red-rimmed from tears that Vespera knew were as false as the woman's heart. Around her, the court had assembled, nobles and warriors, all wearing the silver bands of grief, all murmuring their condolences with voices like honeyed poison. "The moon goddess is merciful, even in her cruelty," Malcoria's voice rang out, silencing the whole. She pressed one hand to her heart, her chin trembling with performed devastation. "My son, my precious Lucian, has been claimed by her divine will. He has ascended to run with the first wolves in the eternal hunt." Vespera's grip tightened on the tray until her knuckles went white. Ascended. As if the boy hadn't been pushed, hadn't plummeted screaming toward the stones. As if his small body wasn't covered in bruises from where Vespera had caught him, from where the impact had nearly shattered them both. "The moon goddess required a sacrifice," Malcoria continued, her voice breaking beautifully, each crack calibrated for maximum sympathy. "And she chose the purest among us. My boy with his father's eyes. My heart, my blood, my—" A sob tore from her throat, so convincing that several of the younger nobles looked away, overcome. Vespera wanted to scream. Wanted to tear through the hole and claw the truth from Malcoria's lying mouth. Instead, she moved silently between the tables, refilling cups, invisible as all Omegas were meant to be. In the shadows near the eastern archway, Beta Mordain stood watching. He didn't wear mourning black. He wore crimson, the color of fresh kills, of power, of blood that hadn't yet dried. His arms were crossed over his broad chest, his jaw sharp as a blade, his dark eyes tracking Malcoria's performance with something that might have been pride or hunger or both. When Malcoria's gaze drifted to him, something passed between them. A look that lasted only a heartbeat but spoke volumes. Her lips curved, barely perceptible, before she turned back to her audience and let another tear slide down her perfect cheek. "The king is away on campaign," she said, her voice steadier now, threading with steel beneath the silk. "He trusted me to protect our son, and I have failed him. I have failed us all. But I will honor Lucian's memory by ensuring the bloodline continues. I will not let grief weaken this kingdom." Vespera's blood turned to ice. Lord Cassius, ancient and scarred, rose from his seat at the far end of the table. "Luna Malcoria, the laws are clear. Without an heir of the king's blood." "The laws," Malcoria interrupted smoothly, "were written when the moon goddess still walked among us. But she has taken my son as her offering. Surely that grants me authority to interpret her will." Mordain stepped forward from the shadows, his boots heavy on stone. "The Luna speaks wisdom. The kingdom cannot remain heirless while enemies circle our borders. Stability requires leadership." Several heads nodded. Others frowned, uncertain. Vespera forced herself to keep moving, to remain unnoticed, even as her mind raced. This was it. The beginning of the coup. Malcoria wouldn't wait for Alaric's return. She would install her own heir, her own power, before the king could discover what she'd done. "I propose," Malcoria said, her voice rising like a prayer, "that we hold a ceremony of succession. That we honor my son's memory by ensuring the throne passes to one worthy of the moon goddess's blessing. One who has been prepared for this burden." The hall erupted in whispers. Vespera's tray slipped, the wine sloshing, and a goblet tumbled. It hit the floor with a sound like a death knell, crimson liquid spreading across black stone like blood. Every eye in the hall turned toward her. Malcoria's gaze found her, cold and calculating, before dismissing her as nothing, as all omegas were nothing. "Clean that up," the Luna said softly. "We mustn't let disorder stain a sacred occasion." Vespera dropped to her knees, her heart a drum of terror in her chest, knowing that above them all in the wall of whispers, the true heir was still breathing. Still alive. Still waiting. 3 days after the Feast of Mourning, Malcoria unveiled her abomination. Vespera stood among the other servants in the Hall of Howling, that ancient chamber where every Leaken king since the first wolves had been crowned beneath the iron chandelier shaped like a wolf's jaw. The walls were carved with the names of the royal bloodline, each one etched in silver that gleamed in the torchlight. Centuries of unbroken succession, of sacred covenant between the moon goddess and the descendants of her chosen pack. Now Malcoria would shatter it all. The Luna entered through the obsidian doors, and beside her walked a boy. 15, perhaps 16 years old, with Mordane's sharp jaw and predatory eyes, but with Malcoria's copper hair and pale skin. He wore ceremonial leathers dyed blood red, a silver circlet already resting on his head as though the crown were a foregone conclusion. Vespera's breath caught. She'd heard whispers, of course. Servants always knew the secrets that nobles thought were hidden. Whispers of Malcoria's nephew, who'd been raised in the Eastern Territories, away from court. Whispers of a boy who visited the Luna's chambers through hidden passages when the king was away on campaign. But seeing him here, paraded before the court like a legitimate heir, made the betrayal visceral. "Lords and ladies of Sanguis Noctis," Malcoria's voice echoed through the hall, clear and commanding. "I present to you Vayne Mordane, son of my late sister and Beta Mordane. Raised in the eastern provinces, trained in the old ways, blessed by the moon goddess herself." Every word was a lie wrapped in silk. Her late sister had died childless. Everyone knew it. But dead women couldn't contradict their stories. Lord Cassius stood from his seat on the Council of Seven, his scarred face twisted with disgust. "Luna Malcoria, this is sacrilege. The blood oath demands the throne pass through the king's direct line. This boy carries no royal blood. This boy," Mordane's voice cut through the hall like a blade, "carries the blood of warriors. Of survivors. The moon goddess claimed Lucian because the boy was weak. Soft. Would you have a kingdom ruled by weakness?" Vespera's nails bit into her palms. Lucian wasn't weak. He was 3 years old and had survived a fall that should have killed him, was surviving now in a tomb of stone with only her scraps of stolen food keeping him alive. Lady Hesperia, the king's sister, rose from her seat, her movements slow and pained. The silver-haired woman had been ill for months, some wasting sickness that hollowed her cheeks and made her hands tremble. But her voice, when she spoke, carried the weight of royal authority. "Brother's blood or no blood at all," Hesperia said, each word deliberate. "Those are the terms of the covenant. To place a bastard on the throne is to invite the moon goddess's wrath. She will curse this kingdom to ash and bone." Malcoria's smile never wavered. The moon goddess speaks through signs, not through dying women who cling to outdated traditions. "She took my son. She cleared the path for new blood, stronger blood." "She took nothing," Hesperia spat, and for a moment her eyes blazed with the same amber fire that marked all those born of the king's bloodline. "You speak blasphemy to hide murder." The hall went silent. Mordane's hand moved to his blade. Several warriors shifted, uncertain who they would defend if steel was drawn. Vayne stood motionless, his expression carved from stone, but Vespera saw his fingers twitch toward the ceremonial dagger at his belt. Malcoria laughed, the sound light and mocking. Murder? My dear Hesperia, your sickness has addled your mind. I held my son as he took his last breath after the fall. I wept over his broken body. Half the court witnessed my grief. Half the court witnessed a performance, Hesperia countered, but her voice had weakened. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. When my brother returns. When the king returns, Malcoria interrupted smoothly, he will find his kingdom stable and protected. He will find an heir ready to rule, trained and strong. He will thank me for ensuring continuity in his absence. Lord Cassius shook his head. The other territories will never accept this. The Western Pacts, the mountain clans, they honor the old laws. They will see this as the violation it is. Then they will learn, Mordain said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, that the old laws die with old kings. We are entering a new age. An age where strength matters more than ceremony. Vayne finally spoke, his voice younger than Vespera expected, still touched with the uncertainty of adolescence. I will prove myself worthy. I will honor the throne and the kingdom. I swear it on my blood. He drew the ceremonial dagger and sliced his palm, letting crimson drops fall onto the ancient stone floor. It was the gesture of binding, of oath-taking. But without royal blood, without the sacred amber eyes, the oath was hollow, meaningless. And yet the court watched. Some faces showed approval, others horror, but none moved to stop it. Malcoria placed her hand on Vayne's shoulder, a gesture of maternal pride that made Vespera's stomach turn. The ceremony of succession will take place in 7 days. We will honor my son's memory and crown his successor. Any who oppose this decision may voice their concerns to the council. Her eyes swept the room, landing briefly on Hesperia, on Cassius, on the handful of lords and ladies who looked ready to rebel. Or, Malcoria added softly, they may choose to mourn privately. Away from court. Away from unfortunate accidents. The threat hung in the air like poison. Vespera backed toward the servants' entrance, her heart hammering. 7 days. She had 7 days before Malcoria's bastard wore the crown that belonged to the boy hidden in the walls. 7 days before the ancient blood oath was violated beyond repair. 7 days to decide if she would let the kingdom fall into darkness, or if she, an invisible Omega who was supposed to be nothing, would risk everything to resurrect a dead prince. Vespera found Lady Hesperia collapsed in the eastern corridor 3 hours past midnight, her body crumpled against the cold stone like a discarded gown. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, black in the moonlight streaming through the arrow slits. For a heartbeat, Vespera considered walking past. Considered leaving the king's sister to whatever fate had found her in these abandoned halls. Getting involved with nobility was a death sentence for an Omega, and she already carried enough secrets to earn her a silver blade through the heart. But then Hesperia's eyes opened, those sacred amber eyes that marked her as Alaric's blood, and they locked onto Vespera's with an intensity that froze her in place. "Help me," Hesperia whispered, the words barely audible. "Please." Vespera's mind screamed at her to run, but her body moved forward, kneeling beside the fallen woman. Up close, she could see how the sickness had ravaged Hesperia, her silver hair thin and brittle, her skin stretched too tight over elegant bones, her breath rattling in her chest like stones in a dying river. "I need to get you to the healers." "No." Hesperia's hand shot out, gripping Vespera's wrist with surprising strength. "Not the healers. They're the ones poisoning me." The words hit Vespera like a physical blow. "What?" "Mordain's people. In the healing chambers." Hesperia coughed, and more blood flecked her lips. "They've been adding something to my medicine. Slowly. So slowly even I didn't realize until it was too late. Until I became too weak to oppose the Luna's plans." Vespera's heart hammered. She glanced down the corridor, ensuring they were alone. "We need to move you somewhere safe. If they find you here, they'll finish what they started." Hesperia tried to push herself up and failed, her arms trembling. "Help me to my chambers. There's a draft there, hidden behind the mirror. My mother's recipe. It won't cure me, but it might buy me time." Vespera slid her arm beneath Hesperia's shoulders, taking most of her weight. The woman was light as a bird, all hollow bones and wasting flesh. They moved through the shadows together, Vespera supporting her, their footsteps muffled by the storm still raging outside. Hesperia's chambers were in the northern tower, far enough from the central keep that servants rarely ventured there. The room was sparse but elegant. Silk curtains the color of moonlight, a bed piled with furs, and weapons mounted on the walls like promises of violence. A warrior's room, despite the feminine trappings. Vespera lowered Hesperia onto the bed and moved to the mirror as instructed. Behind it, in a hollow carved into the stone, she found a small vial filled with liquid that shimmered like starlight. 2 drops on the tongue, Hesperia said, her voice barely a whisper now. Vespera administered the medicine carefully, watching as Hesperia's breathing slowly eased, as some color returned to her ashen cheeks. It wasn't healing, it was merely slowing the dying. "Thank you," Hesperia said after a long moment. Her amber eyes studied Vespera with unsettling focus. "What's your name, Omega?" "Vespera, my lady." "Vespera." Hesperia repeated it slowly, as though tasting each syllable. "Evening Star. A strange name for a servant. My mother had strange ideas about what I might become." "And what have you become?" Hesperia's gaze sharpened. "A girl who risks everything to help a dying woman she doesn't know? Or something more?" Vespera's throat tightened. She should leave. Should disappear back into the shadows where Omegas belonged. But something in Hesperia's eyes held her captive, a knowing, a searching that made her feel exposed. "I'm no one," Vespera said carefully. "Just a servant." "Liar." The word was soft, but it cut like steel. Hesperia pushed herself up on her elbows, her gaze never leaving Vespera's face. "I can smell it on you. Milk and honey and something else. Something royal." Vespera's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you—" "Don't insult me with more lies." Hesperia's voice gained strength, fueled by some desperate urgency. "I've spent my entire life surrounded by royal blood. I know its scent. Its signature. You carry traces of it, girl. Old traces. Hidden traces. But unmistakable." "That's impossible. I'm an Omega. I'm nothing." "Nothing." Hesperia laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "Is that what they taught you? That your rank erases your bloodline?" She reached out, her fingers brushing Vespera's cheek with unexpected gentleness. "Someone in your family line mated with royalty. Long ago, perhaps. Hidden away. But the blood doesn't forget. It never forgets." Vespera pulled back, her mind reeling. Her mother had died when she was 6, had told her nothing about her father except that he'd been someone important, before disappearing into the Eastern Wars. She'd always assumed it was a servant's fantasy, a comforting lie to make poverty bearable. "Why are you telling me this?" Vespera whispered. "Because," Hesperia said, her eyes burning with fierce intensity, "the moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. You were in that garden when Lucian fell. You caught him when no Omega should have had the speed or strength. And now you're here, helping me when you should have run." She leaned closer, her breath hot against Vespera's ear. "Tell me, girl. Is my nephew alive?" The question hung in the air like a blade suspended above Vespera's throat. Every instinct screamed at her to deny it, to protect the secret she'd bled for. But Hesperia's amber eyes saw through her, saw through every lie, every defense. "Yes," Vespera breathed, the admission tearing from her like a confession. "He's alive. Hidden." Hesperia's eyes closed, and a single tear tracked down her wasted cheek. Thank the moon goddess. Thank her merciful light. She gripped Vespera's hand, her fingers like iron despite her weakness. "Then we have a chance. A slim, desperate chance to save this kingdom from the wolves already inside our walls." "We." Vespera's voice cracked. "My lady, I'm just—" "You're the only thing standing between hope and oblivion," Hesperia interrupted fiercely. "Your milk and honey and royal blood, whether you accept it or not. And if we're going to survive the next 6 days, if we're going to expose Malcoria's treason and restore the rightful heir, I need you to stop being just an Omega and start being the warrior your bloodline demands." Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the room in stark white light. And in that moment, Vespera saw herself reflected in Hesperia's eyes, not as an invisible servant, but as something dangerous, something vital, something that might actually save a kingdom, or burn it to ash trying. The wine cellar smelled of earth and fermentation and secrets that had aged in darkness for centuries. Vespera descended the stone stairs behind Hesperia, each step taking them deeper beneath the fortress, deeper into treason that would earn them all a slow death if discovered. At the bottom, 7 figures waited in the shadows cast by a single torch. Warriors all, their faces hardened by decades of blood and battle. Lord Cassius stood at their center, his scarred visage grim as stone. Beside him were faces Vespera recognized from court. Lady Seraphine with her iron-gray braids, Commander Theron who'd lost his arm in the border wars, Captain Lyra whose twin blades had drunk the blood of 100 enemies. And 3 others she didn't know, but whose eyes held the same amber fire that marked them as distant branches of the royal bloodline. "You brought an Omega." Cassius's voice was flat, accusatory. His hand rested on the pommel of his sword. "Hesperia, have the poisons finally rotted your mind?" "This Omega," Hesperia said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "is the reason we're not burying the king's son in a pauper's grave. She caught Lucian when he fell. She's kept him hidden while Malcoria parades her bastard through our halls." The silence that followed was suffocating. Commander Theron stepped forward, his single eye narrowing as he studied Vespera. "The boy lives." Vespera's mouth went dry. 7 pairs of eyes fixed on her, weighing her, judging her. She was used to being invisible, to moving through the world like smoke. But here, in this tomb of stone and wine and conspiracy, she felt exposed. Naked. "Yes," she forced out. "He lives." "Where?" Captain Lyra demanded. "Hidden. Safe." "That's not an answer, girl." Lyra's hand moved to one of her blades. "For all we know, you're Malcoria's creature, sent here to sniff out resistance." "If she were Malcoria's creature," Hesperia said coldly, "the boy would be dead, and we'd be having a very different conversation, probably with silver blades at our throats." One of the unknown warriors, a man with a jaw like granite and eyes like winter ice, moved closer to Vespera. He circled her slowly, deliberately, like a predator assessing prey. Then he leaned in, inhaling deeply near her neck. Vespera flinched but held her ground. "She carries the boy's scent," the warrior said finally. "Fresh. He's been close to her within the last few hours. And beneath that..." He paused, his expression shifting to something like confusion. "She carries old blood. Very old. Royal." "Impossible," Cassius spat. "She's an Omega. Omegas don't." "Omegas are the forgotten branches of every bloodline in this kingdom," Hesperia interrupted sharply. "Cast aside, bred out, made invisible by pride and tradition. But the blood doesn't vanish just because we refuse to acknowledge it." She placed a hand on Vespera's shoulder. "This girl has royal blood flowing through her veins. Diluted, distant, but undeniable. The moon goddess guided her to that garden. Guided her to catch the boy. Guided her to me." Lady Seraphine, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Her weathered face was thoughtful, calculating. 5 days until Malcoria crowns her bastard. 5 days until she violates the blood oath and brings the moon goddess's curse upon us all. We need more than divine guidance. We need a plan. "The plan," Hesperia said, "is to reveal the truth. To bring Lucian before the court and expose Malcoria's treason." "She'll kill him the moment he's visible," Theron countered. "She'll kill the girl. She'll kill anyone who stands between her and that throne." "Then we move before she can," Cassius growled. "We strike first. We eliminate Malcoria and Mordain, install Lucian with a regency council until Alaric returns." "And civil war erupts within the hour," Lyra cut in. "Half the court already supports Malcoria. They see Vayne as strong, as capable. They believe the moon goddess's will narrative. If we assassinate her without proof, without the boy as living evidence, we become the traitors." The arguments began then, voices rising in the confined space, each warrior offering plans more desperate than the last. Assassination, kidnapping, open rebellion. Each strategy dissected and discarded, each path forward blocked by political reality or military impossibility. Vespera stood silent, listening, feeling the weight of Lucian's life pressing down on her shoulders. He was 3 years old. He didn't understand politics or blood oaths or divine will. He only knew that his mother had tried to make him fly, and that Vespera had promised to keep him safe. Enough. The word escaped her before she could stop it. The room fell silent. 7 pairs of eyes turned to her again, but this time the weight felt different. Expectant. You're all arguing about how to win a war, Vespera continued, her voice stronger now. But wars are won in moments. In choices. Malcoria's succession ceremony is in 5 days. Every noble in the kingdom will be present. Every eye will be on Vayne as he takes the crown. She met Cassius's gaze, then Hesperia's. That's when we bring Lucian forward. That's when we let the kingdom see that their true heir lives. They'll slaughter you where you stand, Theron said, but there was a note of respect in his voice now. Perhaps. Vespera's jaw tightened. But they'll see Lucian first. They'll see his amber eyes. They'll know the truth before anyone can silence it. And truth is harder to kill than people. Silence stretched between them, heavy as iron. Then Cassius laughed, a sound like grinding stones. Mad, utterly mad. He studied Vespera with new eyes, as though seeing her for the first time. You'd walk into the lion's den holding a lamb and expect the lions not to feast. I'd walk into the lion's den, Vespera corrected, and remind the lions who their rightful king is. Lady Seraphine smiled, sharp as a blade. I like her. The question, Hesperia said softly, is whether we're brave enough to follow her lead. One by one, the warriors exchanged glances. Some uncertain. Some calculating. But slowly, incrementally, Vespera saw the shift happen. The moment when desperation became determination, when doubt crystallized into resolve. Cassius was the first to kneel. The movement was stiff, his old bones protesting, but he lowered himself to one knee before Vespera and pressed his fist to his heart. I acknowledge you as guardian, he said, his voice formal, ritualistic. Keeper of the air. Shield of the bloodline. Vessel of the moon goddess's will. One by one, the others followed. Theron. Lyra. Seraphine. The 3 unnamed warriors. Until only Hesperia remained standing, her amber eyes bright with tears. Guardian, Hesperia whispered, and then she too lowered herself, her weakened body shaking with the effort. Vespera stared at them, 7 of the most powerful warriors in Sanguis Noctis, kneeling before an Omega who 6 days ago had been invisible, voiceless, nothing. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted, her voice cracking. None of us do, Cassius said, rising with a grunt. But we know what we're fighting for. And that girl is more than half the battle. Hesperia stood, gripping Vespera's hand. 5 days. We have 5 days to prepare, to plan, to ensure that when you walk into that hall with Lucian, you don't walk alone. The moon goddess brought you to us, Vespera. Now let's pray she'll see us through to the other side. Outside the wine cellar, above them in the fortress proper, the storm continued its assault on stone and steel. But here, in the darkness beneath the world, something else had been born. Not just a conspiracy. A rebellion. And at its center stood an Omega who refused to be invisible anymore. The 5 days passed like a fever dream, each hour stretching and compressing until Vespera could no longer distinguish between waking and nightmare. She spent every stolen moment with Lucian in the Wall of Whispers, feeding him scraps of bread and dried meat, telling him stories about brave princes and faithful guardians, preparing him for what was coming without letting him understand the blade that hung above both their necks. Now the moment had arrived. The hall of howling overflowed with bodies. Every noble house in Sanguis Noctis packed into the ancient chamber, their breath fogging in the cold air, their eyes fixed on the raised platform where Vayne stood in ceremonial crimson. The crown of the first wolves rested on a pillow of black velvet beside him, waiting to be placed on his illegitimate head. But first, there would be blood. Malcoria had orchestrated it perfectly, a public execution before the coronation, a demonstration of the new regime's strength. Silas the Wanderer, a minor lord accused of speaking treason against the Luna, knelt at the center of the platform. His hands were bound with silver chains that burned his skin, his head bowed in forced submission. Mordain stood behind him, a silver blade gleaming in his hand, ready to sever the traitor's head from his body. Vespera pressed herself against the far wall among the other servants, Lucian hidden beneath her cloak. The boy was small enough, light enough, that the bulk of fabric concealed him if she held him just right. His small arms wrapped around her waist, his face buried against her side, his body trembling with fear she could feel resonating through her own bones. "I'm scared," he whispered so quietly only she could hear. "I know, little prince. But you're brave. Braver than any of them." She stroked his hair through the cloak, her other hand gripping the hidden dagger Hesperia had given her. Not that it would do much good if things went wrong. When things went wrong. Across the hall, she caught Cassius's eye. He stood among the warrior elite, his hand resting casually on his sword. Beside him, Lyra and Theron had positioned themselves near the exits. Seraphine stood with the noble ladies, her iron-gray braids coiled like serpents, her expression serene as death. Hesperia sat on the council bench, her face pale but determined, the vial of her mother's medicine hidden in her sleeve. They were as ready as they would ever be. Malcoria rose from her throne, resplendent in black silk embroidered with silver moons. "Before we crown a new future," she proclaimed, her voice carrying through the hall like prophecy, "we must cut away the rot of the past. Silas of House Thorn stands accused of treason, of speaking against the moon goddess's chosen path, of denying the legitimacy of our new heir." "I denied nothing," Silas rasped, lifting his head. Blood trickled from his split lip. "I only asked where the king was. Why he wasn't consulted about his son's succession." "The king," Mordain said coldly, "has been informed. He trusts his Luna to maintain order in his absence. Your questioning of that trust is treason." He raised the blade. "Any last words?" Silas's eyes swept the crowd, desperate, searching for someone who would speak for him. But the hall remained silent. Nobles who might have supported him looked away, unwilling to risk Malcoria's wrath. "Then you die nameless," Mordain said, and began to bring the blade down. "Wait." Vespera's voice rang out, clear and sharp, cutting through the hall like a knife through silk. Every head turned. Hundreds of eyes finding her, a servant who had dared to speak in the presence of nobility, who had dared to interrupt an execution. Malcoria's face twisted with fury. "Who dares?" Vespera stepped forward from the wall, and as she moved, she let the cloak fall away. Lucian stood beside her, small and fragile, his amber eyes glowing like twin suns in the torchlight. The sacred eyes. The royal eyes. The eyes of the heir everyone believed was dead. The hall erupted. Gasps. Screams. Nobles surging forward. Warriors reaching for weapons. The sound built like a wave, like thunder, like the howling of wolves that gave the hall its name. "Impossible," Malcoria breathed, her face draining of color. Then, louder, desperate, "An illusion. A trick. Some Omega's bastard with painted eyes." "No trick, sister." Hesperia rose from the council bench, her voice cutting through the chaos. "That is Lucian Alaric, son of the Lecan king, rightful heir to the throne of Sanguis Noctis. The boy you pushed from the tower. The boy the moon goddess protected because his time had not yet come." "Lies." Malcoria shrieked. "All lies." Her eyes found Vespera, and in them burned a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. You vermin. You stole my victory." "I saved a child," Vespera said quietly, but her voice carried. "I caught him when he fell. I kept him hidden while you mourned the son you murdered. While you violated every sacred law to install your bastard on a throne that doesn't belong to him." Vane stood frozen on the platform, his young face stricken. For a moment, Vespera almost pitied him. He was a pawn in his mother's game, raised on lies, shaped into a weapon he never asked to be. Malcoria's hand disappeared into her gown. "Down!" Cassius roared. But Vespera had already seen it. The flash of silver, the predatory lunge, Malcoria moving with inhuman speed across the hall. The Luna was a warrior in her own right, trained since childhood, and now all that training focused on a single purpose: eliminating the witness to her crime. The silver dagger gleamed as it arced toward Lucian's heart. Vespera moved without thought. Her body responded to instinct older than consciousness, older than fear. She threw herself between the blade and the boy, her arms spreading wide, making herself a shield of flesh and bone. The impact was cold. Impossibly cold. The silver dagger punched through her chest just left of center, driven by Malcoria's full strength, by desperation and rage and the fury of a mother watching her ambitions crumble to ash. Vespera gasped, the air driven from her lungs. She looked down and saw the hilt protruding from her body, saw the crimson spreading across her servant's dress like a bloom of poisoned flowers. Behind her, she heard Lucian scream. The hall exploded into violence. Cassius's sword cleared its sheath. Lyra and Theron moved on Mordain. Warriors loyal to the old blood clashed with those who'd sworn to Malcoria. Steel rang against steel. Blood spattered ancient stone. But Vespera saw none of it. Her legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, one hand pressed to the wound, feeling her life pulse hot and wet between her fingers. The pain was distant, muffled, as though happening to someone else. Malcoria stood over her, breathing hard, her face twisted with savage satisfaction. You should have stayed invisible, Omega. Should have known your place. My place, Vespera whispered, forcing the words through blood-filled lungs, is between darkness and light. Between death and the boy who will be king. She smiled, crimson staining her teeth. And you will never touch him again. Hesperia was there suddenly, kneeling beside her, pressing cloth to the wound. Hold on, Vespera. Hold on. The king returns tonight. He'll find his son alive, Vespera breathed. That's enough. That's everything. Lucian pushed past Hesperia, his small hands grabbing Vespera's face, his tears hot on her cold skin. No. No, no, no. You promised. You promised you wouldn't leave. Oh, little prince. Vespera's vision blurred, darkening at the edges. I'm not leaving. I'm just flying. Like your mama wanted you to. But I'll catch the wind. I'll catch it and hold on. Until you're safe. Around them, the battle raged. Cassius had Mordain on his knees. Seraphine and her allies had surrounded Vayne, protecting him from the violence even as they stripped the crown from his reach. Lyra's blades drank deep of traitor blood. And Malcoria, seeing her world collapse, seeing her conspiracy exposed and her allies falling, turned to run. She made it 3 steps before Theron's blade found her spine. The Luna crumpled, her scream cut short, her body folding like a broken doll. She clawed at the stone floor, trying to crawl, trying to escape, but her legs no longer answered. Blood pooled beneath her, black as her ambitions. The moon goddess, Hesperia said coldly, standing over the fallen Luna, has rendered her judgment. But Vespera barely heard it. The darkness was closing in, warm and soft, pulling her down into depths where pain couldn't follow. Lucian's voice called to her from very far away, growing fainter with each heartbeat. The last thing she saw before the black took her was Lucian's face, those amber eyes so full of life, so full of hope. She'd kept her promise. The heir lived. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. The doors of the Hall of Howling exploded inward with a sound like thunder splitting stone. The battle, already winding down as Malcoria's allies surrendered or fell, froze completely as Leaken King Alaric strode through the smoke and carnage, his war-stained armor still crusted with blood from distant battlefields, his amber eyes blazing with a fury that made even the bravest warriors step back. Behind him came his elite guard, 20 wolves who'd fought beside him through the eastern campaigns, their faces hard as the weapons they carried. They fanned out into the hall, assessing threats, securing exits, their presence transforming the space from battlefield to throne room in a matter of heartbeats. Alaric's gaze swept the hall, the bodies on the floor, the silver chains, the abandoned crown, Vayne kneeling and surrounded, Malcoria's broken form still twitching in a spreading pool of crimson. Then his eyes found his son. Lucian stood in the center of the hall, his small body covered in someone else's blood, tears streaming down his face as he clung to a dying woman's hand. For a moment, the king stood frozen. His face cycled through emotions too fast to name. Shock, confusion, grief, rage, before settling into something terrible and cold. My son lives. The words were barely audible, but they carried through the hall like a death sentence. My son, whom my Luna told me had fallen from a tower. Whom she assured me was taken by the moon goddess. His voice rose, shaking the rafters. My son, who by all accounts should be buried in the royal crypts, stands before me covered in blood while my wife lies dead on these stones. Father. Lucian's voice broke on the word. He tried to move toward Alaric but couldn't bring himself to release Vespera's hand. Father, she saved me. She saved me and now she's dying and I don't know how to. Alaric crossed the distance in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside his son, pulling the boy against his armored chest with one hand while the other reached for Vespera. His fingers found her throat, searching for a pulse, and his expression shifted when he found it, weak, thready but present. Who is she? Alaric demanded, his eyes snapping to Hesperia, who knelt on Vespera's other side trying to staunch the bleeding. Her name is Vespera, Hesperia said, her voice steady despite the tears tracking down her face. An Omega. A servant. The woman who caught Lucian when Malcoria pushed him from the obsidian tower. Who hid him in the walls for 5 days while your wife plotted to crown her bastard in his place. She met her brother's eyes. The woman who just took a silver blade through the heart to protect your son's life. Alaric's jaw clenched, the muscles jumping beneath his scarred skin. He looked down at Vespera's face, so pale now, her lips blue, her breathing shallow and irregular. Why? The question was directed at the universe, at the moon goddess, at whatever force had put this slip of a girl between his son and oblivion. Why would an Omega risk everything for a prince she didn't know? Because, Vespera whispered, her eyes fluttering open, focusing on him with difficulty, someone had to. And I was there. Alaric stared at her, and something in his expression cracked. You saved my son. I caught him. A weak smile ghosted across her blood-stained lips. The moon goddess did the rest. Brother. Hesperia's voice cut through the moment, sharp and urgent. The blade struck deep. Silver in her blood. She needs a healer, needs. She needs more than a healer can provide. Alaric carefully shifted Lucian to Hesperia's arms despite the boy's protests. Then he stood, and when he turned to face the hall, he was no longer just a man or a father. He was the Lycan king, and his fury was a palpable thing. Cassius. His voice was iron. Report. Cassius stepped forward, blood dripping from his blade, his scarred face grim. Luna Malcoria conspired with Beta Mordain to murder your heir and install Mordain's bastard son on the throne. She pushed Prince Lucian from the tower 5 days ago. Vespera caught him. Kept him hidden. We formed a resistance, planned to reveal the truth during today's coronation. He gestured to the carnage. When we did, Malcoria attempted to murder the boy. Vespera took the blade meant for him. Alaric's eyes found Mordain, who was being held at swordpoint by Theron and Lyra. The Beta's face was defiant even in defeat, his lip curled in a sneer. You dare, Mordain spat. I dare what needed to be done. Your bloodline is weak. Your son is soft. The kingdom needs strength, needs warriors, not. He never finished the sentence. Alaric moved faster than any human should have been able to move, crossing the hall in a blur, his hand closing around Mordain's throat and lifting him off his feet. My son, Alaric said softly, each word precise as a blade, survived a fall that should have killed him. Survived 5 days hidden in walls while traitors plotted his death. Survived watching the woman who saved him take a blade through the heart. His grip tightened, and Mordain's face purpled. My son has seen more horror in 5 days than you have in your entire miserable existence. Do not speak to me of weakness. He released Mordain, letting him drop, gasping to the stones. Then Alaric drew his own blade, silver, ancient, the sword of kings, and pressed the tip to Mordain's throat. For treason against the crown. For conspiracy to murder the heir. For violation of the sacred blood oath. Alaric's voice rang through the hall, formal, final. Beta Mordain, I sentence you to death by silver blade. May the moon goddess judge your soul and find it wanting." "Wait." Mordane's plea was cut short as Alaric drove the blade through his throat, angling upward, severing everything vital in a single efficient stroke. The beta convulsed once, twice, then went still, his blood joining Malcoria's on the ancient stones. Alaric pulled his blade free and turned to where Vayne still knelt, surrounded but untouched. The boy, for he was just a boy, barely 16, stared at his father's corpse with an expression beyond grief, beyond horror. "Stand," Alaric commanded. Vayne stood on shaking legs, his hands still bound, his face streaked with tears. "My king, I never wanted." "You are Vayne Mordane, bastard son of my wife and my beta. You are not my blood. You have no claim to my throne." Alaric's voice was merciless. "But you are young, and poisoned by the ambitions of those who should have protected you instead of using you as a weapon." Vayne's eyes widened, hope and fear warring in their depths. "I sentence you," Alaric continued, "to exile. You will be escorted to the eastern territories beyond our borders. You will take nothing but the clothes on your back. You will never speak the Mordane name again. You will never return to Sanguis Noctis on pain of death." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Use this mercy wisely, boy. Become something better than what your parents tried to make you." Vayne collapsed to his knees again, this time in relief or despair or both. Thank you, my king." "Take him," Alaric ordered, and 2 guards hauled Vayne to his feet and dragged him toward the exits. The remaining conspirators, those who'd supported Malcoria's coup, were identified and removed from the hall one by one, to face their own judgments. Some would die. Others would be stripped of titles and lands. None would escape unmarked. Through it all, Alaric's eyes kept returning to Vespera, who had faded back into unconsciousness, her breathing growing fainter with each passing moment. When the last traitor had been removed, when the hall was clear of all but his most trusted warriors and his family, Alaric returned to where his son still held the dying Omega's hand. "Father, please." Lucian's voice was raw from crying. "Please don't let her die. Please." Alaric knelt again, this time on Vespera's other side, across from Hesperia. He studied the wound. The silver blade had struck true, piercing lung and possibly heart. By all rights, she should already be dead. That she still breathed was either the moon goddess's mercy or her cruelty. "There may be a way," Hesperia said quietly, drawing something from her sleeve. A pendant, ancient silver carved with runes that seemed to move in the torchlight. Luna Selene's pendant. Mother's pendant. The legends say it can heal wounds no mortal medicine can touch. "The legends also say it demands a price," Alaric said, his voice heavy. "Every blessing does." Hesperia's hands trembled as she held the pendant. "But we owe her a debt we can never repay. If there's even a chance. Do it." Alaric's decision was immediate. Save her. Whatever the cost. Hesperia placed the pendant on Vespera's chest, directly over the wound, and began to whisper words in the old tongue, the language of the first wolves, words that had been spoken at the founding of the kingdom. The pendant began to glow, soft silver light spreading through the metal, seeping into Vespera's torn flesh. Her body arched, a silent scream trapped in her throat, her eyes flying open but unseeing. Lucian cried out, trying to reach for her, but Alaric held him back. "Let the magic work, son. Let the moon goddess decide." The light grew brighter, blinding, until everyone had to look away. The hall filled with the smell of ozone and roses and something older, wilder, divine. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light vanished. Vespera lay still. Too still. For a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, no one breathed. Then her chest rose. Fell. Rose again. Her eyes opened, clear now, focused, and found Lucian's face. "Little prince," she whispered. "You're safe." Lucian threw himself across her, sobbing, and this time Alaric didn't stop him. The Lichen King sat back on his heels, his hand pressed to his chest over his heart, his eyes closing briefly. "Thank you," he said to the heir, to the moon goddess, to whatever force had seen fit to spare the woman who'd saved everything he loved. "Thank you." Outside, dawn broke over the fortress of Eternal Fangs, painting the stones in shades of crimson and gold. And in the Hall of Howling, where so much blood had been spilled, where treason had been exposed and justice delivered, a new day began. Vespera woke 3 days later to moonlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize and pain that had transformed from agony to something deeper, stranger, a tingling that spread through her veins like liquid starlight. She lay in a bed so soft it felt like floating, surrounded by silk sheets the color of fresh snow. The room was vast, appointed with furniture carved from dark wood and inlaid with silver. Tapestries depicting the first wolves hung on the walls, their amber eyes seeming to watch her with knowing intelligence. This was not a servant's quarters. "You're awake." Hesperia's voice came from the shadows near the window. The king's sister sat in a high-backed chair, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, her face less drawn than the last time Vespera had seen her. The pendant, Luna Selene's pendant, hung around her neck, its runes still faintly luminescent. Vespera tried to sit up and gasped as the movement sent sparks of sensation racing across her skin. Not pain exactly. Something else. Something that felt like her body was learning to speak a language it had never known. Slowly, Hesperia cautioned, rising and moving to her bedside. The transformation isn't complete yet. The pendant's magic is still working through you. Transformation. Vespera's hand moved to her chest, where the silver blade had pierced her. Through the thin sleeping gown, she could feel smooth skin. No wound. No scar. Only a faint warmth, as though her heart beat with something more than blood. "You died," Hesperia said bluntly, settling on the edge of the bed. For 47 seconds, your heart stopped beating. The silver had done its work, poison spreading through your veins, shutting down everything vital. "We lost you." Vespera stared at her, unable to process the words. Dead. She had been dead. But the pendant brought you back. Luna Selene's magic, the blessing of the moon goddess herself, pulled your soul back from whatever darkness was claiming it. Hesperia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. And in doing so, it changed you. Awakened something that had been sleeping in your blood since birth. "I don't understand." "Your wolf," Hesperia said softly. "Every Lecan carries a wolf within, our other half, our primal self. Most Omegas have wolves so weak they're barely more than whispers. Shadows of what we once were before centuries of oppression and selective breeding stripped the power from the lowest ranks." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "But your wolf was never weak, Vespera. It was dormant. Waiting. And the pendant's magic didn't just heal your wounds, it shattered the chains that kept your wolf imprisoned." As if summoned by the words, Vespera felt something stir inside her. A presence, vast and ancient, unfurling like wings she'd never known she possessed. Her vision sharpened, colors becoming more vivid, more alive. She could smell everything, the beeswax candles burning in the corner, the lavender sachets tucked into the bedding, Hesperia's fear and hope mingling into something complex and beautiful. And beneath it all, she could smell herself. Not the servant scent she'd carried all her life, something muted, easy to ignore. This was different. This was power. Wild and clean and undeniable. "What's happening to me?" Vespera whispered, staring at her hands. Were her fingernails longer? Sharper? "You're becoming what you were always meant to be." Hesperia took her hand, squeezing gently. "But there's more you need to understand. The pendant doesn't give blessings freely. It transforms, yes, but it also reveals. Shows us truths we've been hiding from, even from ourselves." A knock at the door interrupted them. Alaric entered without waiting for permission, Lucian at his side. The king wore simple leathers now, his armor discarded, but his presence still dominated the room. Lucian's face lit up when he saw Vespera awake. "Vespera." The boy rushed forward and would have thrown himself onto the bed if Alaric hadn't caught him gently by the shoulder. "Carefully, son. She's still healing." But Vespera reached for him anyway, pulling him into a careful embrace. He smelled like honeycakes and childhood, safe things, innocent things that still existed in this dark world. "I'm all right, little prince. I'm all right." "You were dead." Lucian's voice cracked. "Father said you were dead and I thought I'd lost you like I lost." He couldn't finish, but he didn't need to. The ghost of Malcoria hung in the silence. "I'm here," Vespera murmured, pressing her lips to his hair. "I'm not going anywhere." Alaric's eyes met hers over his son's head, and something passed between them, gratitude, recognition, something that made her breath catch. "The pendant saved you," he said, his voice rough. "But Hesperia says the transformation is ongoing. That we won't know the full extent of what you've become until the next full moon." 4 days, Hesperia added. "In 4 days, the moon will be complete, and you'll shift for the first time. Your true form will emerge." Vespera's heart hammered. She'd seen the nobles shift, watched them transform into massive wolves with gleaming coats and razor teeth. Predators. Killers. Everything she'd never been. "I've never shifted before," she admitted. "Omegas like me. We're usually too weak. Our wolves are more idea than reality." "That won't be your problem." Alaric moved closer, his expression thoughtful. "If the pendant chose to transform you, if it awakened your dormant power, then your wolf will be strong. Perhaps stronger than any of us are prepared for." "I've been reading Mother's journals," Hesperia said, standing and moving to a desk where ancient books lay open. "Luna Selene was an Omega herself before she became queen. The pendant was created specifically for her bloodline, those born into the lowest ranks but carrying hidden royal heritage. It recognizes its own kind." Vespera's mind reeled. "You think I'm descended from Luna Selene? I think the pendant wouldn't have worked if you weren't." Hesperia returned with one of the journals, its pages yellow with age. "Mother wrote about a prophecy. About an Omega with royal blood who would rise in the kingdom's darkest hour. Who would stand between darkness and light and emerge transformed." She met Vespera's eyes. "Who would become guardian not just to the heir, but to the kingdom itself." "That's madness," Vespera breathed. "I'm no one. A servant who happened to be in the right place. Nothing about you is an accident." Alaric's voice cut through her protests. "You caught my son in mid-air with speed no Omega possesses. You hid him for 5 days while trained warriors searched. You took a silver blade through the heart and survived." He knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to her eye level. "The moon goddess chose you, Vespera. She has been choosing you your entire life. The pendant simply made it undeniable." Vespera looked down at Lucian, who watched her with those amber eyes so full of trust and love. Then at Hesperia with her knowing smile. At Alaric, whose respect felt heavier than any crown. "What happens if the transformation goes wrong?" she asked quietly. "If I can't control what I become? Then we'll help you learn control." Alaric's answer was immediate. "You didn't let my son face death alone. We won't let you face rebirth alone." As if responding to his words, the pendant around Hesperia's neck pulsed with light. Hesperia gasped, her hand flying to the metal, and then her eyes widened. "It wants to bond with you," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "The pendant wants to complete the transformation. It needs to be touching your skin during the full moon, or the change will be incomplete." "Dangerous." She removed the pendant and held it out. The silver chain swayed, the carved runes seeming to move and shift, ancient words in a language older than the kingdom. Vespera could almost hear them, a song, a prayer, a promise. "This belonged to Luna Selene," Hesperia said. "To my mother. To every queen who understood that true power comes not from rank but from sacrifice. From love. From the courage to stand between monsters and innocence." She placed the pendant in Vespera's palm. The metal was warm, alive. "Now it belongs to you." The moment the pendant touched her skin, Vespera felt it, a surge of connection, of rightness, as though a missing piece of her soul had finally clicked into place. The presence inside her, her wolf, surged forward, pressing against her consciousness with desperate hunger. Images flashed through her mind. Luna Selene standing on a battlefield, her Omega form transformed into something magnificent and terrible. Her mother's mother's mother, a servant girl who'd caught a prince's eye and changed a dynasty. Threads of blood and fate weaving back through centuries, all leading to this moment, this girl, this impossible transformation. "It hurts," Vespera gasped, her body arching as power flooded through her. Her bones felt like they were reshaping, her muscles tearing and rebuilding. The bed frame cracked beneath her grip. "Fight through it," Alaric commanded, his hand steady on her shoulder. "The pain means it's working. Means you're strong enough to survive what's coming." Lucian grabbed her other hand, tears streaming down his face. "You can do it. You're the bravest person I know. You're my guardian. My protector. You're my Vespera." The boy's voice cut through the agony like a blade through silk. Vespera focused on him, on those amber eyes, on the trust in his face, on the future she'd nearly died protecting. She thought of the wall of whispers, of 5 days holding a terrified child in darkness. Of the hall of howling, of silver blade and crimson blooming across her chest. She'd survived worse than pain. She'd survived death itself. This was just the transformation that followed. Slowly, incrementally, her body adjusted to the power coursing through it. The agony faded to a deep ache, then to warmth, then to something that felt almost pleasant, like stretching muscles that had been cramped too long. When she opened her eyes, the room looked different. Sharper. More real. She could see individual dust motes floating in the moonlight, could count the threads in the tapestries, could read the titles on book spines across the room that should have been too far away to decipher. "Your eyes," Lucian whispered. Hesperia brought over a silver mirror, and Vespera stared at her reflection. Her face was the same sharp cheekbones, same silver hair, same pale skin. But her eyes had changed. They glowed. Faintly amber around the edges, bleeding into the grey-blue that had always been hers. Not full royal gold, but touched by it. Blessed by it. Marked by the moon goddess herself. 4 days, Alaric said again, and this time his voice carried not warning but anticipation. "In 4 days, we'll see what you've truly become. What the moon goddess has created from an Omega who refused to stay invisible." Vespera touched the pendant now hanging around her neck, feeling its warmth pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Inside her, her wolf stirred, no longer a whisper or shadow, but something vast and ancient and hungry for moonlight. Whatever she was becoming, whatever power the pendant had awakened, one truth remained crystal clear. She was no longer the girl who'd caught a falling prince in a garden of moonflowers. She was something new. Something the kingdom had never seen. And the full moon would reveal whether that something would save them all. Or consume them. The full moon rose 2 nights later, and Vespera felt its pull like a hook buried in her chest, dragging her toward the window. She pressed her palms against the cool glass, watching the silver orb climb above the obsidian spires, feeling her wolf surge and writhe beneath her skin, desperate to break free. "Not yet," she whispered to herself, to the beast inside her. 2 more days. 2 more days to understand what I'm becoming before I let you loose." "You're afraid of her." Hesperia's voice came from the doorway. The king's sister held a leather-bound book against her chest, its cover worn smooth by centuries of handling. "You're wolf. You're afraid of what she'll reveal." Vespera didn't turn from the window. "Wouldn't you be? I've spent my entire life being nothing. Being invisible. And now there's something inside me that feels like it could devour the world. That wants to." "She won't devour the world." Hesperia crossed the room and stood beside her, both women bathed in moonlight. "She'll devour your fear. Your doubt. All the lies you've been told about what Omegas are, what they can be. That's what terrifies you, not the power itself, but accepting that you were never meant to be small." Vespera finally looked at her, at those amber eyes that marked Hesperia as Alaric's blood, as royalty. "How do you know what I'm meant to be?" "Because I know who you are." Hesperia held up the book. "I've spent 3 days in the royal archives, tracing bloodlines, following threads that were deliberately cut and hidden. And I found you, Vespera. I found where you came from. Who you came from." Something cold settled in Vespera's stomach. "I don't have family. My mother died when I was 6. She never spoke of my father except to say he was gone." "She was protecting you." Hesperia moved to the bed and sat, opening the book across her lap. Pages of genealogies spread before them, names written in careful script, lines connecting marriages and births across generations. "Your mother's name was Selene. The same as Luna Selene, But that's no coincidence. She was named for our ancestor because she carried that bloodline, distant, yes, diluted by generations of Omega breeding, but undeniable. Vespera's breath caught. That's impossible. My mother was a laundress. She cleaned blood from noble linens. She died of a fever in the servants' quarters. Your mother, Hesperia said gently, was the great-great-granddaughter of Luna Selene's sister. An Omega branch of the royal family that was hidden away, bred out of history because they complicated the narrative of power. Because acknowledging them would have meant acknowledging that royalty and Omega blood could mix. That rank wasn't everything. She traced her finger along one of the genealogical lines, following it down through the decades until it reached a name written in different ink, newer, Selene of the Silver Hair. Your mother, Hesperia continued, caught the eye of someone she shouldn't have. Someone whose name would have destroyed him if the affair became known. Who? Vespera's voice was barely audible. Hesperia turned the page, and there it was, another genealogy, this one showing the direct royal line. Alaric's name. His father before him. And his father's brother, a man named Castor who had died in the Eastern Wars before Vespera was born. Hesperia's finger rested on Castor's name. Your father was Prince Castor, second son of the previous Lycan king. Alaric's uncle. A man known for his kindness toward servants, his disregard for tradition, and his mysterious death during a campaign that many suspected was arranged by those who discovered his secret. The room tilted. Vespera gripped the edge of the bed, her enhanced vision blurring as tears burned her eyes. No, that can't be. Your mother would have told you eventually, I think. When you were old enough to understand the danger. But she died too soon, and the secret died with her. Hesperia closed the book carefully. Except secrets written in blood never truly die. They live on in the bodies of children who inherit more than just their parents' eyes. Vespera's hand moved to the pendant hanging around her neck. Luna Selene's pendant. Her ancestor's pendant. The magic that had recognized her blood, had chosen to transform her, suddenly made terrible sense. If my father was Prince Castor, she said slowly, working through the implications, then Alaric is my first cousin once removed, Hesperia finished. And Lucian is your second cousin. You're not just his guardian, Vespera. You're his family. His blood. Hidden, yes. Denied, yes. But family nonetheless. The weight of it crushed down on her, not just the revelation of her parentage, but everything it meant. Every moment she'd spent invisible, every year she'd believed herself to be nothing, had been a lie. Not a comforting lie, but a necessary one. A survival tactic in a kingdom that would have killed her if they'd known what blood ran through her veins. Does Alaric know? She whispered. I told him yesterday. Hesperia's expression softened. He wept. For his uncle, whom he loved deeply. For you, growing up alone and unprotected. For the years stolen by fear and tradition. He wants to acknowledge you publicly, wants to give you your rightful place in the royal household. No. The word came out sharper than intended. Vespera stood, pacing to the window and back, her newly awakened instincts warring with lifelong conditioning. No, I can't. If people know, if the court discovers that I have royal blood, they'll say it was all planned. That I saved Lucian not out of duty but out of ambition. That everything I did was calculated to seize power. Let them say it, Hesperia countered. You know the truth. We know the truth. The truth doesn't matter in courts. Vespera's laugh was bitter. You know that better than anyone. Perception is everything. And right now, I'm the Omega who saved the prince. The miraculous nobody who became a hero. That story is powerful because it's aspirational. Because every servant in this fortress can look at me and think, maybe that could be me. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart hammering beneath her ribs. If you tell them I'm secretly royal blood, I stop being their hero. I become just another noble playing Games of Thrones. Hesperia studied her for a long moment, then smiled, sad but proud. You're wiser than you know. And perhaps you're right. The timing is delicate. The kingdom is still healing from Malcoria's betrayal. Adding another revelation might fracture loyalties further. So we keep it secret, Vespera said. The bloodline stays hidden. I remain the Omega Guardian. And when the time is right, if the time is ever right, then maybe. A knock at the door interrupted her. Alaric entered, and the moment their eyes met, Vespera saw the knowledge there. The recognition. He looked at her not as a servant or even as a guardian, but as family. Cousin, he said simply, and the word hung in the air between them like a bridge. Vespera's throat tightened. She wanted to run to him, to this man who represented everything she'd never dared claim: family, belonging, acceptance. But her feet remained rooted. My king, she managed, and the title felt wrong now, too formal, too distant. Alaric, he corrected, crossing the room to her. When we're private, you will call me Alaric. Or cousin, if you prefer. But never my king again. Not between blood. He pulled her into an embrace before she could protest, his arms strong and steady and safe. Vespera stood rigid for a moment, then broke, collapsed into him as sobs tore from her chest. 20 years of loneliness, of believing herself unwanted and unworthy, cracked open and bled out. I'm sorry, Alaric murmured into her hair. I'm sorry you grew up alone. Sorry my uncle couldn't protect you or claim you. Sorry this kingdom made you invisible when you should have been treasured. It kept me alive, Vespera choked out. Being invisible kept me alive. Perhaps. He pulled back, his hands on her shoulders, his amber eyes, her family's eyes, burning with fierce intensity. But you're not invisible anymore. And I will not let this kingdom forget what you've done. What you are. Royal blood or not, you saved my son. You're part of this family now, in every way that matters. Lucian appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by the mention of him. Father? Vespera? What's happening? Alaric glanced at Hesperia, then at Vespera, a question in his eyes. She nodded, understanding. Some secrets needed to be told, especially to those who'd earned the right to know them. Come here, son. Alaric held out his hand, and Lucian crossed the room to stand between them. We need to tell you something about Vespera. About who she really is. As Alaric explained, gently, carefully, Vespera watched Lucian's face cycle through confusion, wonder, and finally joy. When the truth settled, when he understood that the woman who'd saved him was his blood, his family, his cousin, the boy's smile was radiant. So you're not just my guardian, Lucian said, reaching for her hand. You're my family. You're really, truly my family. Yes, Vespera whispered, squeezing his small fingers. I'm your family. Good. Lucian's certainty was absolute. Because I already loved you like family anyway. Now it just makes sense. Out of the mouths of children, truth rang clearer than any courtly pronouncement. Vespera looked at the three of them, Alaric with his steady strength, Hesperia with her knowing wisdom, Lucian with his innocent acceptance, and felt something shift inside her. Not her wolf, though that beast paced and prowled. Something deeper. Something that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. The full moon is tomorrow night, Hesperia said softly. Your first transformation. Your true form will emerge, and we'll see what Bloodline has created. What Luna Selene's magic and Prince Castor's courage combined to make. Vespera touched the pendant, feeling its warmth pulse against her skin. Tomorrow night, she would shift for the first time. Tomorrow night, her wolf would break free. And when she did, Vespera would no longer be invisible, or nothing, or small. She would be exactly what the moon goddess had intended all along. Royal blood running through Omega veins. Warrior hidden in servant's clothing. Guardian with the strength to protect kingdoms. Family forged not by proclamation but by sacrifice. Whatever form she took under tomorrow's moon, she would face it with her blood beside her. And that, she realized, was the greatest transformation of all. 5 years had passed since the night Vespera's wolf had broken free beneath the full moon. Magnificent and terrible, silver-white as her hair, with eyes that burned amber gold. 5 years since she'd become not just guardian but royal protector, acknowledged in private as blood but maintaining her Omega status in public. 5 years of peace in a kingdom that had forgotten the taste of treason. until Lord Cornelius Mordain brought war to their gates. The alarm bells shattered the pre-dawn silence, their discordant clanging dragging Vespera from dreams of moon-soaked forests. She was dressed and armed within moments, her instincts honed by half a decade of training with Alaric's elite guard. The silver blade at her hip, a gift from the king himself, felt light as air in her hand as she raced through the fortress corridors toward the western wall. The battlements were chaos. Warriors scrambled into position, archers knocking arrows, commanders shouting orders over the din. Vespera pushed through to the wall's edge and looked down at the valley below. An army, thousands strong. Banners bearing the Mordain crest, a wolf skull crowned with thorns, snapped in the wind. At their head rode Lord Cornelius, Beta Mordain's older brother, a man who'd been campaigning in the Eastern Territories when his brother's treason had been exposed. A man who'd spent 5 years gathering allies, feeding on resentment, building an army of those who believed Vayne should have been crowned instead of exiled. They must number 10,000, Commander Theron said from beside her, his weathered face grim. Every malcontent from 3 territories. Every noble who thought Malcoria's coup should have succeeded. Vespera's enhanced vision picked out details the others couldn't see. Siege engines being assembled, sappers moving toward the fortress foundations, and in the center of the army, a figure in dark robes whose face was hidden by a hood. There. She pointed. Someone in the command tent, wearing ceremonial robes. Can you see them? Theron squinted. Barely. You think it's a priest? Come to bless their war. Something about the figure made Vespera's skin crawl, made her wolf pace and snarl inside her chest. I don't know. But something feels wrong. Everything about this feels wrong. Alaric's voice cut through the noise as he strode onto the battlements, already armored, Lucian at his side. The boy, no, the young man now, 8 years old and growing into his father's height, wore practice armor and carried a training sword, his amber eyes fierce despite his youth. You shouldn't be here, Vespera said to Lucian, moving to place herself between him and the army below. I'm the heir, Lucian countered, his voice steady. If my people are fighting, I stand with them. You taught me that. She had taught him that. Taught him everything she knew about courage, about duty, about standing between darkness and those who couldn't protect themselves. Looking at him now, this child she'd caught falling from a tower, who'd become family in every way that mattered, pride and terror warred in her chest. Lord Cornelius demands an audience, Captain Lyra announced, climbing the stairs with a message scroll. Says he'll grant us 1 hour to surrender the false heir and acknowledge his nephew Vayne's claim. Otherwise, they attack. Vayne has no claim, Alaric said coldly. He was exiled with mercy he didn't deserve. Cornelius knows this. Cornelius knows his brother died for treason, Hesperia said, joining them on the wall. Her illness had been in remission these past years, the slow poison finally purged from her system, but she still moved carefully. This isn't about claims or justice. This is revenge dressed as righteousness. Vespera watched the army below, watched the hooded figure emerge from the command tent and raise both arms toward the fortress. And as those arms rose, she felt it, a cold spike of wrongness driving through her chest. The pendant. Luna Selene's pendant that she'd worn for 5 years, that had saved her life and transformed her, suddenly blazed to life against her skin. But instead of the warm pulse she'd grown accustomed to, this light was different. Cold. Hungry. It burned like ice pressed directly to her heart. She gasped, stumbling backward, her hand flying to the pendant. It was glowing so bright it shone through her armor, casting eerie shadows across the battlements. Vespera. Alaric was at her side instantly, his hand on her shoulder. What's wrong? The pendant, it's never done this, something's. The words caught in her throat as the cold spread, racing through her veins like liquid frost. Her vision blurred, and for a moment she saw double, the battlements overlaid with another image, another place. A ritual chamber. Blood on stone. The hooded figure from below chanting words in a language that made her wolf howl in recognition and rage. They're doing something, she forced out through chattering teeth. Magic. Dark magic. That figure below, they're connected to the pendant somehow there. The hooded figure's chant reached a crescendo, and the pendant's glow intensified. Vespera screamed as agony lanced through her, as something tried to rip itself out of her chest, tried to tear free and fly across the distance to the figure below. Get it off her. Hesperia lunged forward, reaching for the pendant's chain, but the moment her fingers touched the metal, she jerked back with a cry. Her palm was blistered, burned by cold so intense it mimicked fire. Lucian grabbed Vespera's arm, trying to steady her as she collapsed to her knees. What's happening to her? Someone help her. The pendant is being cold, Hesperia breathed, horror dawning in her eyes. Someone down there knows what it is. Knows how to summon it. To drain it. To drain her, Alaric corrected grimly. He knelt before Vespera, gripping her face between his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Fight it, cousin. Whatever they're doing, fight it. Don't let them take what you've earned. But the cold was overwhelming, spreading through her limbs, making her muscles seize and her bones ache. She could feel her strength being pulled out through the pendant like water through a sieve. Could feel her wolf being dragged backward, imprisoned again, all the power she'd gained over 5 years unraveling strand by strand. The hooded figure below lowered their arms, and the pulling sensation stopped. The pendant's glow dimmed but didn't extinguish, settling into a rhythmic pulse that felt like a countdown. Like a ticking clock measuring out her remaining time. Vespera sagged forward, caught by Alaric before she could hit the stone. Sweat drenched her despite the cold still lingering in her veins. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. What just happened? Theron demanded. A demonstration, Vespera managed, her voice raw. They wanted us to know they can do it. That they have power over the pendant. Over me. But why? Lucian's face was pale, his hand still gripping her arm like an anchor. Why would they want to hurt you? Hesperia's expression was grim as she stared down at the army. Because Lord Cornelius didn't come just for revenge. He came with someone who knows our secrets. Who knows Vespera's transformation was the pendant's work. Who knows that if they can reverse it, if they can drain her power, they remove one of our greatest weapons. More than that. Vespera forced herself to stand, swaying but upright, one hand pressed to the pendant that had become both blessing and trap. They're not just draining me. They're feeding on my power. Building something with it. Whoever that figure is, they're preparing for something bigger than a siege. The hooded figure turned toward the fortress, and though Vespera couldn't see their face at this distance, she felt their gaze like a physical touch. Felt their smile, cold and triumphant. And in her mind, clear as a bell, she heard a voice that made her blood freeze. Hello, Guardian. Did you think the moon goddess's gifts came without a price? Did you think power was yours to keep forever? The voice was familiar in a way she couldn't place, an echo of something she should remember but didn't. The pendant was never meant to save you. It was meant to prepare you. To ripen you. And now, dear Guardian, you've ripened perfectly. It's time for the harvest. The connection severed, leaving Vespera gasping on the battlements, the pendant cold against her chest, an army at their gates, and a countdown she couldn't see ticking toward a moment that would either save the kingdom or destroy everything she'd become. Alaric's arm steadied her. Lucian's hand held hers. Hesperia's eyes burned with determination. Whatever they're planning, Alaric said, his voice carrying the weight of command, we stop it. We hold these walls. We protect what's ours. But Vespera knew, with the certainty that came from magic she'd never wanted and power she'd never asked for, that holding walls wouldn't be enough. The siege had begun. And the real battle was for her soul. The siege engines launched their first volley at dawn, massive stones arcing through the blood-red sky to slam against the fortress walls. The impact shook the very bones of the ancient structure, sending cracks spiderwebbing through obsidian that had stood for centuries. Vespera stood at the battlements despite Alaric's orders to retreat to the inner keep, her silver blade drawn, her wolf pacing frantically beneath her skin. The pendant hung cold and heavy around her neck, a noose of ice counting down to some terrible conclusion. Archers loose. Commander Theron's voice rang out, and 100 arrows blackened the sky, raining down on the advancing army. Men fell, but more surged forward to take their places. Cornelius had brought fanatics. Warriors who believed Vane's exile was an injustice, who saw Lucian's survival as an obstacle to their twisted vision of order. Beside her, Lucian stood in his practice armor, Too young to fight but too stubborn to hide. Vespera had positioned herself between him and the enemy, her body a living shield, just as she'd been 5 years ago when Malcoria's blade had found her heart. "When this is over," Lucian said, his voice steady despite the chaos, "I'm going to make you teach me that move you do. The one where you shift mid-leap." "When this is over," Vespera replied, forcing a smile, "I'll teach you whatever you want." If there was a when. If the pendant didn't finish whatever harvest the cloaked figure had begun. The army reached the walls. Ladders slammed against stone. Grappling hooks bit into ancient mortar. The real battle had begun, not the distant exchange of arrows and stones, but the intimate violence of blade meeting flesh, of warriors grappling at the wall's edge, of screams and blood and desperation. Vespera's sword sang as she met the first climber, her enhanced speed allowing her to strike before he'd fully crested the battlement. He fell backward with a cry, taking 2 others with him. She moved to the next ladder, and the next, her body flowing through forms she'd practiced 10,000 times. But with each strike, she felt the pendant pulse. Felt it drinking her strength, siphoning power with every heartbeat. The cloaked figure appeared on the battlefield below, standing amid the chaos like a stone in a river, untouched by the violence flowing around them. They raised their arms, and Vespera felt the pendant respond. A sympathetic magic, a connection forged in darkness. "No," she gasped, one hand flying to the pendant. "Not now. Not during." The drain began. It was nothing like the demonstration earlier. This was consumption. The pendant blazed with light so intense it blinded everyone nearby, and through that light, Vespera felt her life being torn from her body in great wrenching pulls. Her wolf howled in agony as chains of ice wrapped around it, dragging it down into darkness. Her enhanced vision dimmed. Her strength evaporated like water on hot stone. She collapsed, her sword clattering from nerveless fingers. "Vespera!" Lucian's scream cut through the battle noise. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands on her face. "No, no, no, not again, you can't." Alaric was there in seconds, his presence like thunder. "Hesperia!" he roared. "Get the healers. Get anyone who knows magic." But Hesperia stood frozen at the wall's edge, her face ashen as she stared at the cloaked figure below. "It's too late," she breathed. "The harvest has begun. The pendant is fulfilling its true purpose." Below, the cloaked figure began to change. Their body convulsed, growing, transforming as power flooded into them from across the distance. The cloak fell away, revealing features twisted by dark magic. A man's face, handsome once but corrupted now, his eyes glowing with stolen amber light. Power radiated from him in waves, bending the air, making even the bravest warriors stumble back. "Who is that?" Theron demanded, his voice sharp with fear he rarely showed. "Look at his face," Hesperia said, and there was horror in her voice. "Look at the shape of his jaw, his eyes. That's Cornelius's son. That's Marcus Mordain," Alaric finished, the name falling like a stone. "Beta Mordain's nephew. We thought he'd died in the Eastern campaigns 5 years ago." "He did die," Hesperia whispered. "Or should have. But someone brought him back. Someone who knew about the pendant, about its power. Someone who's been planning this since before Malcoria's coup." Vespera could barely process their words through the agony. The pendant was draining everything. Not just her wolf, not just her enhanced abilities, but the very essence of what she'd become. 5 years of transformation, 5 years of growth and strength and earned power, all being ripped away and funneled into the creature that had once been Marcus Mordain. And with the power came memories. His memories, flooding into her mind through the connection. A ritual chamber beneath the fortress. Malcoria and Mordain standing over an altar. A younger Marcus, wounded unto death from battle, laid upon the stone. Dark magic swirling, a voice speaking words that made reality crack. "The pendant will save her. Transform her. And when she's strong enough, when she's gathered enough power, we'll harvest it all. Transfer it to you. Make you immortal. Make you a god." "And the Omega?" Marcus's dying voice. "She's just a vessel. Nothing more." The truth crashed over Vespera like ice water. She'd never been saved. She'd been cultivated. Malcoria and Mordane's conspiracy had gone deeper than anyone suspected. They'd known about the pendant's dark purpose, had known it could transfer power from one host to another. They'd planned to use Vespera as a battery, to grow power inside her like a crop, then harvest it for Marcus. When their coup failed, when they died, Cornelius had simply continued the plan. Waited 5 years for her to ripen. For the pendant to fill her with enough power to make the harvest worthwhile. She'd been played since the moment she'd caught Lucian. Maybe even before that. Maybe her entire life had been orchestrated toward this moment. Stop it, Lucian was sobbing, his hands trying to remove the pendant, but it had fused to her skin now, burning cold, immovable. Someone stop it. She's dying. Vespera's vision darkened at the edges. Her heartbeat slowed. Below, Marcus Mordane laughed, the sound echoing across the battlefield like thunder, and his body continued to transform, growing larger, more monstrous, his stolen power reshaping him into something that hadn't walked the earth since the first wolves fell. She's not just dying, Hesperia said, tears streaming down her face. She's being unmade. When the pendant finishes, there'll be nothing left. Not her wolf. Not her power. Not even her memories of being strong. She'll be what she was before, an omega. Invisible. Nothing. No. Alaric's voice was steel and fury. I will not lose another member of my family to the Mordan's ambition. He drew his sword and turned to the wall's edge. Theron, hold the battlements. Lyra, protect my son. Hesperia. I'm coming with you, Hesperia said, drawing a blade of her own despite her weakened state. That's my cousin down there dying. That's my blood being stolen. Then we end this. Alaric looked down at Vespera, at her fading light, at the girl who'd saved his son and become his family. We kill Marcus Mordane and break whatever magic binds that pendant. Or we die trying. Through the haze of pain, Vespera tried to speak, tried to warn them that Marcus was too strong now, too powerful with her stolen essence. But her voice wouldn't come. Her body wouldn't respond. She was a passenger in her own flesh, watching helplessly as everything she'd become was torn away. Marcus Mordane's transformation completed. He stood now 10 feet tall, his body wrapped in muscle and dark magic, his eyes blazing with the amber light he'd stolen from her. When he spoke, his voice shook the earth. Leaken King, Marcus called across the battlefield. Your precious guardian is almost empty. In moments, she'll be nothing. Just another servant you won't even remember. But I'll remember. I'll remember the taste of her power as I tear your kingdom apart. Alaric leaped from the battlements, his war cry savage and primal. Hesperia followed, both of them racing toward the monster that wore Marcus Mordane's face. And Vespera, trapped in her failing body with the pendant drinking the last dregs of her light, could only watch and feel the cold spread deeper, claiming everything she was, everything she'd fought to become. The harvest was nearly complete. And when it finished, she would be erased. Dying felt like drowning in ice water, like being erased one memory at a time. Vespera watched through dimming vision as Alaric and Hesperia charged Marcus Mordane, watched as her family threw themselves at a monster built from her stolen power. They would die. She knew it with the certainty that came from feeling Marcus's strength, her strength, coursing through him like wildfire. They would die trying to save her, and she would die having been nothing but a vessel. A crop to be harvested. A tool used and discarded by those who'd never seen her as human. Just like she'd always been. No. The thought came from somewhere deeper than consciousness, deeper than her fading wolf, deeper than the pendant's ice-cold grip. It came from the part of her that had reached for a falling child without thinking. The part that had stood before Malcoria's blade. The part that had refused to stay invisible even when invisibility meant safety. I am not a vessel. I am not a crop. I am not nothing. Lucian's hands gripped her face, his tears hot on her freezing skin. Please don't leave me. Please. You're my family. You're my guardian, Vespera whispered, and the word ignited something in her chest. Not the pendant's cold magic. Something else. Something that had been there all along, buried beneath the layers of transformation and borrowed power. Her own blood. Her own strength. The forbidden bloodline that ran through her veins not because of the pendant's magic, but because of who she'd always been. Prince Castor's daughter. Luna Selene's descendant. Royal and Omega both, the union of everything the kingdom had tried to keep separate. The pendant had given her power, yes. Had awakened her dormant wolf, enhanced her abilities. But it had also been a cage, a filter, something that controlled and directed what was rightfully hers. The Mordans had known this. Had known that if they put her power through the pendant, they could steal it. Transfer it. Harvest it like grain. But what if she stopped letting the pendant control her? What if she took back what was hers? Not the borrowed magic, but the raw primal power that had always lived in her blood. Through the bond still connecting her to Marcus, Vespera saw what he saw. Alaric's blade striking his transformed body and bouncing off like hitting stone. Hesperia's desperate attacks meeting the same result. The king and his sister, her family, her blood, fighting a losing battle against a monster she had inadvertently created. Enough. Vespera's hand moved to the pendant, and this time she didn't try to remove it. She gripped it with fingers that had gone numb, with strength that was fading, and she squeezed. The pendant resisted. Its magic flared, trying to drain her faster, trying to complete the harvest before she could stop it. Cold flooded through her veins, numbing her heart, stopping her breath. But Vespera had died before. Had felt silver pierce her chest and darkness claim her. Death no longer frightened her. She squeezed harder. The pendant cracked. The sound was like a bell shattering, like reality fracturing. Light exploded from the gem, not the cold blue light of the harvest, but something else. Something ancient and golden and wild. The magic that had been filtering her power, controlling it, containing it, suddenly shattered. And everything that had been dammed up behind it came flooding out. Vespera screamed as her own forbidden blood ignited. Not borrowed power from the pendant, not enhanced abilities granted by Luna Selene's magic, but the raw, primal essence of what she truly was. Royal blood meeting Omega blood, the forbidden union that the kingdom had spent centuries trying to prevent because they knew, had always known, what such a combination could create. A wolf without limits. A queen without crown. A force of nature wearing a woman's skin. The pendant shattered completely, its fragments falling away like ash. The connection to Marcus severed with a snap that made him stagger on the battlefield below, made him clutch his head and scream as the stolen power began to unravel. No. Marcus roared. You were empty. You were nothing. I was never nothing, Vespera said, and her voice carried across the battlefield like thunder. She rose from the stones where she'd been dying, her body no longer weak, no longer fading. Power coursed through her, not borrowed, not stolen, but earned through every moment of suffering, every act of sacrifice, every choice to stand when staying down would have been easier. Her wolf surged forward, and this time there was no pendant to filter it, no magic to control it. She shifted. The transformation was instantaneous, brutal, magnificent. Her body exploded into her wolf form, but this was nothing like the silver-white wolf that had emerged 5 years ago. This was something the kingdom hadn't seen since the first wolves walked the earth. Massive as a warhorse, her fur rippling between silver and gold, her eyes blazing with amber fire that held no trace of humanity's mercy. She was pack mother and warrior queen both. She was everything the old laws had tried to prevent, standing on the battlements of a kingdom that had made her invisible. And she was done being quiet. Vespera opened her jaws and howled. The first wolf's howl. A sound that hadn't been heard in 1,000 years, a cry that spoke directly to the primal core of every Leacan soul. It ripped across the battlefield like a shockwave, and everywhere it touched, warriors of Cornelius's army collapsed. Not dead, but broken. Their wolves cowering before something older, something greater, something that spoke with the authority of the moon goddess herself. The howl said, "Submit or be destroyed." 10,000 warriors dropped their weapons. Fell to their knees. Pressed their faces to the blood-soaked ground in submission so complete it bypassed thought, bypassed loyalty, bypassed everything except the instinct that screamed they were in the presence of their better. Only Marcus remained standing, but even he staggered, his stolen power hemorrhaging away as Vespera's true essence rejected him. The dark magic that had transformed him began to crack and splinter. "Impossible," he gasped. "You're an Omega. You're nothing. You're..." Vespera leaped from the battlements, her massive wolf form sailing through the air with impossible grace. She landed before Marcus with an impact that cracked the earth, that sent shockwaves through stone and soil. "I am the forbidden bloodline," her wolf spoke directly into his mind, the words carrying the weight of destiny. "I am what happens when you try to cage power that was meant to run free. I am the price of your family's ambition." Marcus tried to run, but his body no longer obeyed him. The stolen power was unraveling, eating him from the inside, and Vespera stood witness as divine justice consumed what human justice had failed to reach. When it was over, when Marcus collapsed to ash and memory, Vespera shifted back to her human form. She stood naked before an army of 10,000, her silver hair wild, her body unmarked by the pendant's destruction, and not a single warrior dared meet her eyes. Alaric approached slowly, Hesperia at his side, both of them staring at her with expressions caught between awe and fear. The king stopped 10 paces away, then did something Vespera never expected. He knelt. Not a simple bow but a full kneel of submission, his fist pressed to his heart in the ancient gesture of fealty. Beside him, Hesperia did the same. And behind them, on the battlements, every warrior of Sanguis Noctis who had witnessed what she'd become followed. "Vespera of the forbidden blood," Alaric said, his voice carrying across the silent battlefield. "Daughter of Prince Castor and Lady Selene. Descendant of Luna Selene and the first wolves. Guardian who became queen." He raised his eyes to meet hers, and in them she saw not fear but recognition. Relief. Hope. "Sanguis Noctis has waited 1,000 years for you. For an Omega born with royal blood. For the one who could unite what we divided. For the Queen Mother who would finally make us whole." "I'm not a queen," Vespera said, but even as she spoke the words, she felt their falseness. Felt the truth settling into her bones like destiny recognizing itself. "You are what the kingdom needs," Hesperia said softly. "What we've always needed. An Omega who can stand beside the king as equal. Who can prove that rank is not destiny. That power lives in blood, not in titles or hierarchy." Lucian pushed through the crowd, carrying a cloak that he draped over Vespera's shoulders. His eyes were wide, but not with fear. With pride. "You saved us again," he said simply. "Just like you always do." Vespera looked at the army of surrendered warriors. At the shattered remains of Marcus Mordain. At her family kneeling before her with tears of gratitude streaming down their faces. At the fortress walls where Omegas and nobles stood side by side, watching history reshape itself. She thought of the girl who'd gathered moonflowers in a shadow garden. Who'd caught a falling prince. Who'd been pushed and broken and rebuilt so many times she'd lost count. Who'd been told she was nothing, was invisible, was meant to be silent and small and forgotten. That girl was gone. Had been dying since the moment her fingers closed around a 3-year-old boy and refused to let him fall. In her place stood something new. Something the moon goddess had been cultivating not through the pendant's trap, but through every trial, every sacrifice, every moment Vespera had chosen love over safety. "Then I accept," Vespera said, and the words felt like prophecy. "Not as your ruler. As your partner. As proof that Sanguis Noctis can be more than what we've been. Can heal the divisions we've carved into our own hearts." She reached down and helped Alaric to his feet. Helped Hesperia rise. Pulled Lucian against her side where he belonged. "The Omega ranks will no longer be invisible," she declared, her voice carrying to every corner of the battlefield. "Will no longer be silent. We are the foundation this kingdom stands on, and it's time we were treated as such. Royal blood or common blood, it makes no difference. We all serve the moon goddess. We all deserve dignity." The cheers that erupted were deafening. Omegas on the walls sobbing with relief. Warriors pounding their chests in approval. Even Cornelius's surrendered army began to understand they'd been fighting for a lie, that the true heir had been standing beside them all along, hidden only by their own blindness. 3 days later, in the Hall of Howling where so much blood had been spilled, where Vespera had nearly died twice, she stood before the assembled kingdom wearing a crown of silver and moonstone. Not replacing Alaric, standing beside him. Queen Mother of Sanguis Noctis. The first Omega-born royal in 1,000 years. The first, but not the last. As she took her vows, As she felt the weight of history and future pressing down on her shoulders, Vespera looked out at the crowd and saw something she'd never seen before: unity. Omegas standing proud beside nobles. Warriors embracing servants. A kingdom beginning, finally, to heal its self-inflicted wounds. Lucian stood at her other side, his hand in hers, his amber eyes bright with joy. Her cousin. Her prince. Her reason for everything. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "I'm proud of us," Vespera whispered back. Because this was never just her story. It was the story of everyone who'd been told they were nothing and refused to believe it. Everyone who'd stood between darkness and light with nothing but courage to shield them. Everyone who'd been invisible and chose to make themselves seen. The moon goddess had been right all along. The kingdom's darkest hour hadn't needed a king or a warrior or a prophecy. It had needed an Omega who knew what it meant to fall, and who'd learned how to catch herself. Outside the Hall of Howling, the full moon rose over Sanguis Noctis, painting the fortress in silver light. And somewhere in the gardens below, moonflowers bloomed in shadows that were no longer empty.